Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment is a special experience that really brought me back into this world in a way I did not expect. I did not expect to see the Tears of the Kingdom world in this way. I did not expect that I would ever care about these characters like I did, and I did not expect this game to be so full of aura. With just these characters are so cool. They do the coolest things. You feel incredible for controlling them throughout this entire game. This game is full of just cool things. And that is a huge difference from Age of Calamity in my opinion. I loved Age of Calamity. That game was a phenomenal way of telling the Breath of the Wild story in a very different way, while also giving us a new experience in that Hyrule Warriors style, telling us a little bit more about these characters, what they were like. It's so different from that, because in that game, they were just giving us a Hyrule Warriors game based around the Breath of the Wild style. In this game, it really does feel like that Tears of the Kingdom DNA is all over the place, and they decided to revisit everything from Age of Calamity and say, how can we make it better? How can we retool this experience? How can we make the player feel like they are in control of everything at all times? And they did a phenomenal job with that. Of course, we have Metroid Prime 4 here on the Switch too, and you feel incredibly cool playing as Samus. Samus is one of the coolest protagonists you will ever play as, but I would argue that Age of Imprisonment is Nintendo's coolest game of 2025. And here is why. First of all, the gameplay is so fluid. We need to talk about that first and foremost. That's the first thing that you are going to know when you get into this game. It is fluid as heck, and you are going to be playing as all of these different characters from the past, starting off with Zelda, starting off with Rauru, starting off with Minoru, and then growing that roster as you go through the game and through the story. So many people will say that the Hyrule Warriors style of gameplay, this Warriors style of gameplay, is very repetitive. It is not very engaging, and that it's very hand-holdy to some extent. And of course, with the past Zelda entries, I'm not going to say that they are incredibly deep, but with this game particularly, I will tell you, it is not hand-holdy. It is not all that repetitive. Sure, you can say, for example, that if you're just pressing the same button combinations over and over and over again, it can feel repetitive, but typically each combination is being used for a reason. You will press the Y button 2 or 3 times and then press the X button to get an elemental attack. For example, with Kia, if you press the Y button once and then the X button, she gives a blast of water forward, which is very important if you're fighting some sort of fire monster in which you want to quell them very quickly so you can get down their meter. They have so many different ways of making you feel in control, making you feel like this is a very strategic game, and putting your characters in the exact right position to succeed the best way possible. You are essentially a general. You are playing as a general in this game, and you are controlling all of these characters like the Master Hand from Super Smash Bros., and you're able to take them from one side of the map to the other. You can look at the mini-map, you can open the map on the pause menu, you can send your characters from one location to another like the other Hyrule Warriors games, and be able to say, okay, over here we have our fire monster, I'm going to send Kia with her water abilities. Over there, oh wait, we've got a goop monster over there. If they are submerged in goop, I'm going to send Kia over there instead, because her water is effective against both fire and goop. But maybe I don't have to use either, because in this game there are Zonai devices from Tears of the Kingdom in which you can use a water hydrant to get rid of either of those. So technically, any character can fight any type of enemy and be just fine. But at the same time, if I have a huge fire monster in front of me, I'm probably not going to send Argaston, the Goron Sage, over there because he has a fire ability. So I don't really want to match fire with fire. I would prefer to send Kia over with her water abilities. Or if I'm facing some sort of Gibdo, I'm obviously going to send Artie over there because she has that electrical ability. And of course, in the Gerudo region, there are some of those nests that will build up, and she is the only one that can destroy it in a single hit. Now, of course, this all is the same type of gameplay that we have seen in games like Age of Calamity prior. But with this game, it is completely and totally different. Why? Well, because even though in Age of Calamity they did have these very cool cutscenes in which you would press the A button for your special attack, and boom, a cutscene would play of your character enveloping all of these enemies, defeating hundreds of thousands of them in one go, and then moving on to the boss. In this game, they added even more features. They added even more stuff to make you feel like you are awesome. One of the biggest gameplay changes that they added to this experience was the Sync Strike. If you are a construct and you are with Zelda, you press the L button when you are near someone that also has their meter filled up. And the only way that you can fill up that meter is if you fight very closely with your allies. So you are rewarded in a sense for keeping everyone in one area, but at the same time, if you're very strategic and you have many different enemies on the battlefield at once, you're going to want to spread them out and send one over there, because sometimes there will be captains and they will cheer out to you and say that they're in some sort of desperate fight and that they're about to die, and if you literally don't send anyone over there, they will. So there is always this this balance of the game telling you to keep your players together, to really have that bond of togetherness, but at the same time, you gotta send them over and you gotta fight as many as efficiently as possible. But with this Sync Strike, there is a cutscene that will play every single time that you press that L button with someone with a meter charge. And it doesn't even have to be a character that you selected for this game. You can swap between 3 to 4 characters depending on whichever mission that you chose. Sometimes it'll only give you 2, 3, or 4, but 4 is the max, and you can switch between 4 different characters and play them. Well, at the same time, it makes sense in terms of the canon that there are going to be different characters there that you did not select on the battlefield. So if you didn't select Zelda, of course Zelda is on the battlefield playing with you, but she is not a playable character. So Zelda will be running around as an NPC, and if she has her meter filled up, which I'm sure any kind of NPC will, you walk up to them once you get your meter filled and you press the L button. So essentially, if you really wanted to, rather than wasting your meter on 1 person at a time, 2 persons at a time, so you can only use it 2 times with your selected characters, you can run up to an NPC and then use it 4 different times with your 4 different characters, if there are 4 NPCs on the battlefield at one time. And are you confused yet? Because there is so much strategy to go with this game, and that is really a big part of what makes you feel like you are this war general. Those cutscenes, every single time you press that L button, every single time you activate a Sync Strike, their hands clap together and they do a cutscene together and then a huge attack. And these are the most powerful attacks in the game. They nerfed the heck out of special attacks from Age of Calamity and from Hyrule Warriors Definitive Edition. You can no longer press that A button and expect all of your enemies in front of you to die, because all of the little enemies, sure, they will go down pretty easily, but a boss, it's barely going to chip away at it, and that did not used to be the case. The Sync Strikes, however, will kill all the enemies around you and also get at that boss very, very well. How many times have you played a game where you were playing as one of the most powerful characters, where everyone is calling you the chosen one, where you are just this ultimate powerhouse, and yet in the gameplay experience, it doesn't seem to match that. You don't feel powerful. The cutscenes will play and you will like defeat an entire army of enemies in that cutscene. You will jump around like a gymnast. You will have such crazy abilities, and then when the gameplay comes back to you, it's very limited. It feels very linear and you don't feel that power because it doesn't make a lot of sense for you to be able to blast all the enemies away in the gameplay. There has to be some challenge there. This game strikes that perfect balance of having that challenge, having those abilities, and yet making you feel like you are aura farming every second of the way. Particularly with this construct here in this game. The Knight construct is what his name is later on. It's essentially the version of Link in this game. The Link from Age of Calamity could use both the sword, the two-handed weapon, and then the spear. In this game, it's the same thing. You can use that, and he's like the Link stand-in. And Link doesn't talk anyways, right? But he is still a human. He does still have those emotions that he sometimes will express every now and then. You'll see him with like a rock that he loves to eat, that big rock from the Age of Calamity cutscene. He's a big glutton in those games. But this guy actually being a construct, I was shocked to see how much it transformed my idea of Link, the idea of this protagonist, powerful character. For whatever reason, I thought that because he wasn't a human, I wasn't going to be as interested in him. We didn't even know if he was going to be Link or what. He just ended up being a construct, and I won't spoil that storyline for you, but there is typically a reason why he is this powerful and why he resembles Link. But if you're going to have a quiet protagonist or some sort of quiet hero, this is the perfect way to do it, in my opinion, because he is cool as heck, and it makes sense that he's not talking because he has no capabilities to speak. He is a construct with no mouth. He will not speak because he cannot speak. It's very different from Link because he's a human, and it's like, why isn't he talking? There's a lot of trauma there that you can read in the diaries of Breath of the Wild, and why he doesn't speak, why he had all these expectations on him. But still, with this construct, it feels different. So from the get-go, you're like, of course he's not going to talk. He's a construct. So when he goes out there and does all these incredibly cool things, it makes so much sense for the storyline and makes you feel even more cool. Then you bring in a guy like Calamo, who is the opposite of this Knight construct. He adds a perfect juxtaposition to this storyline because Calamo is a big, flamboyant personality, and he is definitely going to be that type that brings out the best in the Knight construct, and he calls him his pal, he calls him his buddy. He's with that Knight construct to the very end. And of course, with this game and this experience, having those types of contrasting relationships can really bring out the better of this narrative and of the gameplay itself, because if you're playing as two characters that are so close, and they are very much close in these cutscenes and in the gameplay itself, they don't go through any really rocky spots here, they just consistently stay with each other, then you're going to find yourself really being engaged with these two. And of course, there are several different cutscenes in this game that you play as these two people, and then you're like, oh my gosh, here we go, and then boom, gameplay starts, and you play as Calamo Kalamo and you play as the construct and you're fighting against a foe. And that's kind of the way that they are able to split up this gameplay here. They split it up into two overarching narratives that end up coming together at the very end, which is very cool. You're playing as Zelda, who then goes into the past, learns a little bit about the history, finds Rauru, Sonia, all those people from the past, and then you learn a little bit more about her. Then they transition to this construct, to Kalamo, and to their storyline. They start to do a bunch of different stuff, and luckily both are working at the same time in different directions, and for about half the game, you don't really encounter this Knight construct in the main storyline in terms of Zelda interacting with them, until it's already halfway over. And it's just a really cool way to kind of break up the storyline there, because it can feel very repetitive, not to play the game in my opinion, but to experience this storyline, the same battle after battle after battle, because essentially that's all you're doing, right? You're having a cutscene, then you go into a fight. You have a cutscene, you go into a fight. And it's hard to keep those stakes up at the highest and highest part and make you feel like you're really fighting some urgent battle every single time when there are like a million battles. So the way they kind of digest the two is having Kalamo, having that construct, go on their own plot, their own storyline. Kalamo really just wants a place to put down roots. He doesn't really care about fighting. He doesn't care at all. But this construct seems to care a lot. He seems to want to fight every single evil being in his path, and he goes out of his way to do so. Kalamo stays with that construct, and it provides a little bit of levity to that narrative. Then you go back to Zelda, you go back to Sonia, back to Rauru. You see all of these different sages that you meet, the responsibilities and the duty of a king, Zelda hiding her identity in this timeline, but also making use of those powers that her identity provides. It's just such a cool juxtaposition, and then they bring it together swimmingly. It is perfect when they bring it together, and especially with this ending. That is the reason for the thumbnail. That is the reason for this game having so much aura, is that ending. I swear to you, I was standing up and down, jumping, I was screaming. It was so crazy. This game's ending is incredible, and the cutscenes just make you feel like you are cool as heck. In Tears of the Kingdom, right at the very end of that game, when you go up to the Light Dragon and up to the Dark Dragon and you're fighting the dragons, it feels so incredible because you're this tiny dude fighting literal dragon gods. And they did a phenomenal job of incorporating that cutscene and gameplay element in which you land on the dragon and you go for the last hit, and Link raises up his sword and you press the button for him to plunge that sword into that heart of the crystal there, and boom, it explodes and you are on the Light Dragon watching it all happen. And then Zelda finally gets back to normal. They do a phenomenal job with that ending sequence, and it's the exact same here in Age of Imprisonment. Sure, the narrative in Zelda games can be a big point of controversy, can be a big point of contention, but I'm telling you, with this Breath of the Wild era, they have nailed the endings of these games. Even if the middle and the beginning feels a little bit iffy, the endings always have me on my feet clapping because it was so great. I loved everything about this narrative, everything about learning more about the sages, which was a huge part of this game, by the way. Kia, Argaston, you have Rafika, you have Artie, all of these different characters with different motivations, and they really contrast the races that they come from. The Goron Argaston is a big guy, right? He's very strong, and all of the Gorons in series past usually are a little dumb in a way. Like, they don't have a lot of brains, they have a lot of brawn. This guy is a complete and total refresher of that stereotype. Having someone like Argaston is great for the Goron's legacy because you have someone who is wise, who is willing to take a step back and say, no, let's think about this for a little bit. Let's actually use our heads here. Then you have Kia, who is the Zora queen, it's forced upon her that she's the queen because in this game, her dad dies. And that's not really a spoiler because by the time you get there, it's already happened. The dark construct, because there are two constructs in this game, the good one and then the bad one, essentially. The bad one kills her father, and she is a ball of anger and angst. She seems a little bit younger for her Zora age, even though the Zoras live for a while. She acts like she's younger. She acts a little bit immature, and she is just rambunctious. She goes out there, she fights, she's willing to do whatever it takes, and she's going to fight without thinking. That is very much the opposite of what the Zora have pretty much always been in the Zelda series, which is calm, cool, collected, going to take a step back. You even think of the Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom era with someone like Sidon, who is this big smiling dude who is like very smart. He's not the type of guy who's going to stand around strategizing for a while, but he's also not going to jump into everything head first. He's very charismatic. He's this best dude. You think of Mipha, right? You think of someone who's very kind, very caring, loving, who has this healing ability and hates the idea of wounds. It works very well for her character. And in this game, having someone like Kia, who is just so rambunctious, was a really cool refresher for the Zora. Then you have Rafika, who is the Rito Sage. He is a great refresher for that as well, because you had Rivali back in Breath of the Wild, who was a jerk, a total arrogant jerk, and he would go out there and fight and know he was the best because he was the best and he could back it up. Rafika is the best, but you don't really know that. You wouldn't really get that vibe unless you genuinely saw him fighting, and everyone respects the heck out of him because of it, because he is such a kind dude. Then you have Artie. Artie is everything any Gerudo character should ever be. You can feel the burden of responsibility put on her shoulders from Ganondorf's very existence. The fact that she was serving under Ganondorf as the last of the sect of Gerudo that actually wanted to go against Ganondorf and didn't trust his rule and reign, but they had to, right? It's duty. They are very much born into the society of Gerudo people in which you have to submit to the king if there is a male born. And there's only a male born in the Gerudo every, like 100 years? Ganon was born and he became that king. He was the ruler, and she just listened to him because that's what you do. That's your duty. That's what you were literally born to do. She fights when she doesn't want to. Ganondorf leaves her to die. The construct comes and saves her, and she has a new perspective. She continues to fight against the Hyruleans and against the cause of good, but then at some point she realizes this is nothing. This is really not what you should be fighting for. Ganondorf is not worth all of that. She's convinced to become the new leader of the Gerudo by that sect who never liked Ganondorf, and that burden is there. She doesn't feel worthy of it. She feels like she should be struck down where she stands. But Rauru has grace. Rauru is willing to work with her because he is a king that is so benevolent and caring and is very wise in his ways. It is such a great storyline to have all of these stages come together. And that's why it's even more frustrating in a way for me that Tears of the Kingdom didn't go into these storylines even more, because here I am in Age of Imprisonment on the edge of my seat, learning about these characters, fighting as them, becoming them. It is such a great time, and this game provides that unique experience that you never would have gotten otherwise. And then of course, to round out this segment about the storyline and characters, Zelda, Rauru, Sonia, you learn a little bit more about them. There's a new person called Linalia. She is like this maid that helps Zelda out and is recording all of this information. She was the one who ended up making all of those ruins that you end up finding back in the very beginning of Tears of the Kingdom. Those murals at the very beginning of that game, those were done by Linalia, and she wanted Kalamo and the construct to be in them, but because of how powerful the construct was, how much havoc he wreaked, killing the king of the Zora, killing so many people, almost killing Rauru at the very beginning of the game, they didn't want anyone to think anymore about the construct's abilities. Just seeing more of Zelda in this time period, seeing more of Rauru, Sonia, seeing how she dies, what they do afterwards, how Rauru puts up with everything, it's just incredible. And these characters are phenomenal. They did a phenomenal job with telling the story. And then finally, with the last bit of playable characters here, it is the exact same amount of characters that you could play as in Age of Calamity, but it feels like a lot less because most of these characters are just random NPCs that they made up specifically for this game. In Age of Calamity, you played as Link, Zelda, all of the champions from the past, because of course they were the people who died and that you were able to interact with as ghosts in Breath of the Wild. But you were also able to, after that plot twist of it being a time travel game, you were also able to play as their successors, as the new champions of those eras, as Riju, Sidon, all of those different people that came back. And then of course you were able to play as even more characters from there that we had already known of. Hestu was in that game. They brought back so many different characters that we knew of from Breath of the Wild. This game does have the same amount of characters, like I said, so I'm not going to fault it for having less characters, but the characters aren't as interesting because they're hardly in any cutscenes at all. In fact, they're in none of them. All of these characters only exist to serve as playable characters. And if you were to rush through the main storyline, rush through everything that this game has to provide you and not entertain a lot of that side content, I wouldn't even be surprised if you missed unlocking some of these characters. Some of their movesets were very interesting, very engaging, but the problem is most people aren't going to want to engage with them. They're not going to want to figure out what these movesets are like because there's no reason to. They're not in any cutscenes. They don't care about developing these characters whatsoever, so why should I care to invest my time in this game in playing as those characters rather than the ones that are so much more interesting? There's this one Zora guy, I believe his name is Lago, and he has this really, really cool water ability where if you hold X, he will like throw blades of water out that absolutely destroy almost any monster that is weak to water, but I would imagine most people playing this game did not get to entertain that ability very often because why would you? Why would you care? Let's talk for a minute about something I think Age of Imprisonment does that really brings the experience down. The cutscenes versus the gameplay. The gameplay runs at a crisp, smooth, almost unbreakable 60 FPS, frames per second. That game runs so smoothly, and playing it is a true treat. Seeing the Switch 2 run it at its full capability is bonkers. It's something I never thought I was going to see, especially after the struggles that the frame rate had with Age of Calamity, in which it was at 30 FPS barely, and it would fluctuate so much, and when you were around a ton of big enemies, sometimes the game would stutter to a chug. It was so bad in terms of its frame rate and graphical fidelity. This game makes up for it and more some. And that is one reason I believe that this game feels so much more cool, has so much more aura than Age of Calamity did, because you were able to see it so smoothly. These movements are so fluid. The little in-game cutscenes in which you are using those sync strikes, using those special moves, seeing their abilities in action. It's just so cool. And it's not as cool every single time you transition into a cutscene, because it looks bad compared to the gameplay. It simply looks bad compared to it. And I hate to say that, because you have a game like Tears of the Kingdom in which you have the gameplay and then you have the cutscenes. Those cutscenes are identical to Age of Imprisonment. They are essentially using the exact same cutscene engine or whatever they use to develop these cutscenes. They use the same thing. It looks identical to those cutscenes. But the problem is, when you match it with the gameplay, all of a sudden, it doesn't look any good. It goes down to 30 frames per second. The cutscenes aren't as cool because all of those frames dipping really do bring down that experience, in my opinion. And the problem is, I fully believe that they could have developed these cutscenes to be 60 FPS. The problem is, I think that they didn't want to have cutscenes that looked better than Tears of the Kingdoms. I think they really intentionally made it to where those cutscenes were the same. Why? Well, because they kind of reuse a lot of those cutscenes from Tears of the Kingdom. This game is driven by the narrative of Tears of the Kingdom, and it does reuse a lot of those plot points because it doesn't deviate from the story at all. It is completely and totally canon. This is exactly what happened leading up to Tears of the Kingdom. And so, of course, it makes sense to reuse some of those cutscenes and add in some filler around it, add in some context, because why would you just make a bunch of new cutscenes out of nothing? It makes no sense to tell the same story with different cutscenes. That is, in my opinion, a laughable excuse to not get those cutscenes up to 60 FPS. It ruined the experience in a lot of ways for me because I was so immersed with this gameplay, so immersed in what was happening, and then it would cut to a 30 FPS water painting, and I would be like, this doesn't look very good. This is very much taking me out of the experience here. Now, of course, I got used to it, right? And the more I played, the more I was like, okay, fine, we're good. But going back and forth between those gameplay, between those cutscenes, it was hard. It was a very stark difference. And also, just one more last thing here to round out this gameplay experience. You are able to do something different from Breath of the Wild and Age of Calamity. In Age of Calamity, you had the Divine Beast, and every single time you would play as a champion, you would have these little mini levels in which you could play as the Divine Beast and just wreak all sorts of havoc on the land. But rather than using those big, almost performative type gameplay cutscenes, you used the construct to be able to fly around and incorporate those different elements of flying enemies. These are really cool, and they feel a lot like Galaga, especially in the final boss. There's one where they kind of segue from the fighting on the ground to up in the air. They make use of that mechanic very well, but it's just different from Age of Calamity. It doesn't feel as cool, in my opinion, because you're not playing as these big beasts that you saw in Breath of the Wild. You're playing as a brand new character that we never saw before, and he is able to transform, but he's also kind of small, so it feels grand because you're flying around, and these cutscenes are really cool. But at the same time, it's just not as grand as it was before, which is fine. It's fine. I really don't knock it for that. It's just that it's different. But it also did serve as a good gameplay variety for people who do think that those combos of pressing Y, 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 X are very repetitive, because you're able to go and just play essentially a different type of game. Okay, the last thing I need to talk about here is Ganondorf himself. Ganon is weird in this game. He is very powerful, obviously. Like, everyone knows it, and everyone is afraid of him, and everyone is willing to do anything they can to stop him. In these games, in these cutscenes, you can see Ganondorf is a force. The problem is we don't see a lot of him, and sometimes I wonder if they didn't even bring back the voice actor and they just used some of those same lines from Tears of the Kingdom. He doesn't talk much at all, and the times he does give any sort of new lines are not voice lines. They are usually dialogue on the text itself, like they are showing us on the screen him speaking in moments that I really thought he should have been actually speaking with his voice. I'm not going to spoil it too much, but in the very final battle of this game, he is talking through cutscenes that don't even have him talking. It's just you reading what he's saying. And it's like, they did not bring back Matthew Mercer, did they? I don't know. He is definitely a daunting enemy for sure. Like, if you look at everything around you, every single thing is because of him. Every monster you slay, he's summoned, which means he is summoning millions of monsters. He is literally capable of summoning all of these different things. He is the most powerful being in existence. There's even a point in the storyline where every single character that you have up to that point is there, all with their secret stones, all ready to fight in the castle castle that they're ready to take back, and Ganondorf sends a single beam of gloom down to them, and they decide they have to retreat because there's no way that they can defeat him like this. It makes Tears of the Kingdom storyline even more important, and even makes it retroactively make it more sense. Because the only way that they had any hope of defeating this monster of a being, this behemoth of a king, was to bring him down into the depths, to trap him, and to use his arrogance against him. And that barely worked. The only reason that worked was because he was arrogant enough to think that he had already beaten them, and then he didn't even die. He just got trapped down there for like a millennia. And then he comes back in Tears of the Kingdom and is just as strong as he once was, and it doesn't even take him that long to regenerate. This guy is a beast. But I would be lying to you if I said that I was completely and totally satisfied in Ganondorf as the big bad villain in this game. He just didn't bring a lot to the table in ways that I thought he would. It's weird because you can see Ganondorf's influence everywhere in this world. You can see in every single battle, everything that he did. He brings these big monsters that wreak havoc on the entire land to life. We kill them all one by one, painstakingly. It's such a long and strenuous process to go through and defeat all of these different huge monsters. And then the big four mini bosses or bosses that you do defeat, he brings back in a snap. In a cutscene, he just brings them back to life. And he's like, go, get him again. He could just do that. He can do that. That's insane. And so the cool factor is very much there. They decide to leave him in the castle the whole time, and he's just like, I'm gonna let them do my bidding because I can just summon them over and over and over again, and I can make you do whatever I want because I'm Ganondorf and I will win in the end. He has this arrogance about him that's like, I don't have to move. I will do it without moving. So it just makes it all the more disappointing to see how cool he is, how strong he is, how smart he can be, and yet we don't really engage with him all that much. Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment is a game I did not expect to see this year. It was a game I did not expect to find on the Nintendo Switch 2, and a game I really was excited to interact with but didn't expect to enjoy this much. In my 2025 rankings video of the games that Nintendo released, I put this in S tier, and I still stand by that. Having finished the game since then, I would probably put it maybe even higher if I could. This game, I hope, is the last iteration of the Wild era, and I really hope that they end it here because it's the perfect ending. It was absolutely perfect, and the content that they're going to keep adding to it does make me want to come back into it because that gameplay is just so satisfying to master, to remember every single move and every single combination and every single elemental attack that every enemy and ally will have. It all just makes me want to keep engaging with this game. It's such a phenomenal experience that I would highly recommend to most people. So here we are at the end of these reviews, the type of person that would like this game. If you are a massive Zelda fan, if you are a fan of Tears of the Kingdom, if you're a fan of Breath of the Wild, if you want to know more about this story, more about what happened back then and how Ganondorf is so powerful, how he was able to do all these things, you see a lot more of that backstory. You learn more about the sages. If you're interested in that at all, this game is for you. If you are a big warrior style fan, if you just want a hack and slash type gameplay, this game is absolutely for you. It has a lot of depth to it in a way that I think Age of Calamity really didn't have. You are encouraged to have this theme of togetherness, to have this theme of staying with your characters as much as possible, while also encouraged to be like, hey, you have to balance that with sending your allies towards different enemies to make sure the entire map is being taken care of at once. If you're interested in Zelda lore at all, this game is for you. If you're interested in the idea of playing any sort of thing related to Tears of the Kingdom, related to Zelda, this game is for you. The type of person I think this game would not be for is the type of person who would say that this does seem repetitive to them. Even though I would push back on that idea, I would push back and say, no, there is so much strategizing, there is so much with those individual button pushes that you really can push yourself to memorize. If you're the type of person that just likes to play and turn their brain off, this game could be for you, but I really do think you're going to have a struggle of a time if you think these games just don't look interesting. Sure, the storyline might captivate you, sure, all these different things might intrigue you, but if you think that this game doesn't look fun to play, it probably won't be fun for you to play. It's the type of game in which I can really say you don't have to play it to get it. You can look at it and be like, yeah, this is pretty much the gameplay, and you can take it as deep as you want like I did, or you can just be a button masher, press Y over and over and over again, and then not really spend a lot of time getting to know the mechanics even more than that. Sure, the Zonai devices will make that depth go even deeper, but I really do think if you're not interested in this type of gameplay, if you know it's not for you, then probably don't give this one a try because it's not going to be any different than most warrior experiences. I would also say if you're the type of person who is worried about this game's price point and you also don't know if you're liking this experience, if you're liking this type of game, then maybe wait for it to go on sale. I probably wouldn't recommend this to someone who is worried about spending $70 full on an experimental type of gameplay. But outside of that, that, I highly recommend this game to most people. If you are worried about it and you don't know if it seems like it's going to be fun or not, jump on it. Wait for there to be a sale, because it probably will go 20-30% off because it's from Koei Techmo at some point within the next year. This is one of the best looking games on the console because of that 60 FPS gameplay. It's so smooth, it's so fluid, the animations are gorgeous. I love looking at these characters. I could have spent hours more on this game if I really pushed myself to, but I loved everything about it, and I hope you loved everything about this review. So let me know your comments down below, your thoughts, everything about this video, about this game. Tell me your speculations for the future of Zelda, and make sure you like and subscribe if you did enjoy today's content. Click that notification bell and join my membership program. If you want to learn more about what the future of Zelda might be, click on the left side of your screen to see that interview with Aonuma talking about this game, and click on the right side of your screen to see all of my end of year videos, including that rankings video that I mentioned earlier. Thank you for making it to the end. Make sure you have yourself a phenomenal day. This has been Ray's Nintendo Talk. I have been Ray, and I will see you all in the next video.